Welcome to the Beyond the Reef podcast, where I talk to experts and researchers in the reef aquarium hobby, discussing a broad range of topics from corals and reef biology to water chemistry and equipment. We take a deep dive into our guests' methods, techniques, and top reef keeping tips. My name is Adam Sutherland, and I am the owner-operator of Frag Garage Corals, based out of British Columbia, Canada. This podcast is now brought to you by Fauna Marine. I was hesitant to bring on any sponsors, but since I use so many Fauna Marine products, I was really happy to have them collaborate with me. And also, I am now a certified ICP consultant, so if you send in a laboratory ICP test, you can select me as an advisor. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Reef. I've been trying to make this episode happen for a while. It's also my first Australian guests, and it is Juno and Dan from Monsoon Aquatics, who is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, exporter of corals and fish based out of Australia. They have their hands in all kinds of stuff, from coral spawning, their research and development on flow. They do educational courses. They really inspire, I think, the community around them, and I could see the inspiration talking to these guys. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. If you really enjoyed this episode and you want to share it on social media, that's probably one of the best things you can do to help us spread the word of this podcast. Also, hit that subscribe button, like, and comment in the comments section. I'm going to say that this episode is probably a good one to watch on YouTube because I have a ton of video and photo content from them. It's probably the most loaded episode yet. Actually, even the background images don't even repeat. Every single background image is a different coral, so there's no shortage of things to look at during this episode. If you want to support me directly, if you want to make a contribution, you can go to my Patreon at patreon.com/beyondthereefpodcast. All I ask for is just like a little contribution just to, help keep this podcast free of ads and commercial content. So enough of my rantings. I hope you enjoy this episode with Dan and Juno from Monsoon Aquatics. Yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. I got Juno and Daniel from Monsoon Aquatics. Maybe you guys can actually give me just a quick little introduction of what you guys do for Monsoon, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yep.
Juno first. Whoever wants.
I'm Dan. I'm the founding director of Monsoon Aquatics. I started the company about 16 years ago now in Darwin, the Northern Territory of Australia, the wild west up there. And then since we've expanded to Cairns and now to Bundaberg, I've been working in the aquarium industry for over 25 years in different capacities, public aquariums, a little bit aquaculture and commercial fishing, but it's always been around aquariums. So very much obsessed since a very young boy with everything in the ocean, the creeks, and then catching it and keeping it in aquariums.
Cool. And recently you've gotten into doing coral spawning. That's kind of an area you've dove into.
Combine that passion for aquaculture and my training of aquaculture with that, wild harvest and that aquarium side to create, ideally, a full range of totally captive bred, captive produced corals and fish.
Cool. Well, we're gonna get deep into that hopefully over this conversation. So so Juno, you go.
Hi, I'm Juno. I am the aquarist and sales here. This is my 4th year at this company and 4th year into this career. Yeah, so I studied for this. I did a bit of aquaculture at university, and when I finished, I kind of didn't really want to work in a food fish aquaculture industry at that time. I was already a hobbyist. I was already very into coral and very into fish, and I went to reef stock actually, and that's when I met Monsoon staff there, and I met a whole lot of different people as well. And I was like, I kind of want in on this industry, so I joined, and here I am.
and you're at the Bundaberg facility, which is the farming facility, correct? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I thought maybe before we kind of get into some of the detail stuff, we'll just do a quick little history lesson of Australia. Maybe just talk about, something I noticed about Australia and, the corals and the fish and all the diversity is just so, you can see the derivative of other areas nearby, but it's very unique. There's so many uniquely evolved things. So maybe can you kind of explain why the Great Barrier Reef and why the reefs of Australia have such unique diversity?
Ooh, that's probably above my pay grade.
Yeah.
I can tell you from my experience. So I've been lucky enough to dive and harvest, all over Australia, and our teams work from everywhere in, Broome in Western Australia, right around the coast down here to Bundaberg. And what we find is that every region has a specific, I guess, coral or color morph or something that's kind of unique to that region. And what I've found in my experience in the water is you'll find one or two stragglers on the outside, and you'll start picking up, let's say Croc Island Scollies, for an example. When we found those in the NT, we would find the odd one here and there, very rarely. And the same thing for the Parancora in the NT. We used to find a couple here and there. And then one day we just stumbled across the mecca of where they come from, and they're just everywhere. They dominate that habitat. So and you'll find that every spot up and down the coast. Scollies are a great example. They'll stretch down to here to sort of just north of Bundaberg, and then you'll get them north of Mackay, but that's about it. And you'll find stragglers on the outside, and then the closer you get to that epicenter of their habitat, that's when you start seeing a lot of them. I think it's got a lot to do with tides and currents, because obviously when corals spawn, they have to be close by to fertilize, and that larvae is only going to travel so far, and that's all dependent on currents. And so I think currents and water depth and trenches that divide reefs have got a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and probably very specific conditions depending on that area are sort of more conducive to those species being successful, right?
Yeah, 100%. But what we find is that most of those species will adapt, not all, will adapt to general aquarium or farming environments. They do like specific, light and flow, but overall, if you have a good system, a good stable system, you can keep all those animals together.
Yeah, well, and actually that gets me to a question. I was going to get to this later, but what are some major conditions you've sort of noted in the wild, comparatively to keeping in aquariums? Like, obviously some corals are going to be collected at a lot deeper depths. There's probably different nutrients in certain regions. Like, I imagine your systems are run differently in terms of lighting, or like what are some of the differences in how the systems are run?
Well, you can answer the systems, and I'll answer the wild stuff.
Okay.
For our systems, they're actually quite similar throughout. They're mostly catered to LPS, so it's like a big mix of LPS. So the PAR, the alkalinity, the range that we generally chase for is the same, and it's the stability that we're after. I would say it would be quite different to the actual conditions they are in the wild. Our goal is to have these frags get used to the captive environment, to get used to the tank environment, and get them used to that. And then so when we sell these corals to customers, they don't have too big of a difference.
Totally.
So ours is quite controlled, and it's quite different.
Okay. I guess an important question in terms of that, though, is your facilities are probably plumbed into the ocean?
Yeah. So the Bundaberg facility, we've got an oceanic pipeline where we can pump 20,000 litres of salt water per hour. We normally store, it's good
way to do it.
To be honest, I don't think you can run a commercial coral farm without it. It really makes such a difference. And Juno nailed it when she said it's stability. If it's one word of advice that I would have for any aquarist out there, is don't chase numbers, chase stability. And if you can get stability, your corals will adapt to your environment within reason. You've got to be within those accepted parameters. But for instance, we really don't do much ICP testing or really do much of that fine detailed stuff. We chase stability for the basic parameters, pH, alkalinity, salinity, temperature. Once those foundations are rock solid and stable, everything can build on top of that. But until you've got that foundation solid, you're wasting your time trying to chase.
But in your case, if you're plumbed into the ocean, isn't it just constantly just turning over water from the systems, or is it intake and then sits and then switches? It's basically your water changes. I see. Okay. So you're still
Yeah, we have to do water changes when we pack out orders. So you're kind of forced to replace that salt water then. Some of our systems we're trialing like a very small, it's a semi-recirculating system, so it will have a small trickle of salt water going through it. But overall, we generally do a closed system where we're doing water changes, which require siphoning of detritus and that general basic husbandry, and you top it up with clean salt water. And our salt water has got the right alkalinity, the right salinity, right pH before it goes in.
Yeah, and do you up the alkalinity from what the ocean water is, because it's going to be lower than, I mean, generally in North America, a lot of Europe, we're running alkalinity around between 7.5 and 8.5 DKH, like and whereas the ocean I know is a little lower in general, right? So what would you guys kind of run it at?
We actually aim it at around 8 to 8.4.
Okay.
And it kind of stays there, and then it's maintained with electronics as well.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys got some automation on there, and probably with that amount of, I mean, I don't know what the system volumes are in the Bundaberg facility, but it's probably a lot. Imagine.
We run about, I think we're running close to 38 6-meter raceways separated by 5 systems. So a raceway is about 2,000 liters each. So combined, it's a lot of volume. So what happens is when we pump water into our storage systems, which is also another 100,000 liters, we treat that. So we check salinity before we pump it into our system. So that way it's all like treated beforehand. Of course, like filtration as well. Yeah, so then we were able to keep everything at that range and chase that stability that we're generally after.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine in a system of that volume, the stability would be easier to achieve. But then again, you have a lot of coral volume too, so things can still change fast.
It's just the same as a home aquarium, but it's instead of like 13 mil pipe, it's 100 mil, and everything's just scaled up.
Yeah.
We're now installing 3 systems at 18 meters long each, and they're going to utilize a unique paddle wheel to move the water around.
Okay, interesting.
Instead of power heads. So that's our next sort of scale up, is a really quite a large system.
So this is some kind of mechanized wheel that turns the water. Okay, yeah. Wow.
So we've sort of pinched that from, John, our lead scientist, he came up with this idea. And they use it already for microalgae production. So on spirulina farms or big algae farms, they use this paddle wheel. And what we've done is we've just adapted the raceways to suit our coral racks, and we've built a mold with a company, and we're pumping out these tanks to suit our needs. But John, in conjunction with an electrical engineer, has also developed a control board which will change the direction of that paddle wheel and the speed to mimic tidal movement.
Cool.
We can actually pick any part of the world, any reef, look at that tidal data and match it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, because something I notice about flow, diving or snorkeling in a reef versus in our tanks is it has more pressure in a way. You know what I mean? It's like there's that constant like current pressure. We have these more kind of monodirectional type pumps, and sure, you can create little randomizations with the waveforms, but it just doesn't have that gust of flow. So I wonder how much better success you'll see with certain corals when you.
We've already trialed it, and huge success.
Yeah, cool.
Really, the whole water column moves, not just the point source. And we can get a standing wave in these tanks. Crazy. And because you're ramping up and down the speed throughout the tidal movement, all the detritus and all this stuff gets picked up and thrown to, so that I'm not going to say maintenance free, but they're pretty close to being maintenance free from our point of view.
Very low.
Very low. And the corals love it because, for 4 hours a day, they're going one direction, and then they're swapping. It's just like they experience in the wild.
That's cool. It would be interesting to see if something like that could be adapted for a smaller aquarium system. I mean, I don't think it would work without Euro bracing or something like that. But you wouldn't want a rimless.
No, hell no, no way, no. We get splashes over the side, but because we've got drainage on the floor, and like I said, enough salt water, it's okay.
Yeah, okay.
But you also need a a track, almost like a racehorse track. So there's the water spins around, so you can't have a square tank. It has to be specially designed.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, I'd love to see some photos or videos of those system if I
Yeah,
don't know if you have any yet, but
yeah, we can share that.
Yeah.
we'll stick them in here if we can see them. Yeah. So another thing about the saltwater, and I guess just to do a little comparison to say Australia to the rest of the world, is you like most hobbyists are using saltwater that I imagine is clean, UV'd, maybe filtered to a certain degree, but they're not buying buckets of salt and mixing salt generally.
Oh, it's about half and half.
Okay. Okay.
The people who live closer to the coast, and they would, if they can, they would definitely go and collect that water themselves with, just a filter stock, and have it filtered at home in their storage container. And some people prefer salts because they reckon there's a lot less of the risk and potential of bringing anything else in. So yeah, it's kind of like a half and half, and we have plenty of choices. The prices are pretty all right. So yeah, it's half.
Yeah. So I imagine you guys at your facilities, you do sell saltwater to hobbyists. Like, is that an option for them? No.
We can.
We can.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
if we're in Bundaberg, it's quite a small farming little city. I would say I know about 10 hobbyists that have come through.
Yeah. I saw the video, the little aerial. I saw the drone videos of the facility, and it looks like it's pretty out in the boonies. So yeah.
Bundaberg is a regional part of Queensland. I think the total population of the whole city is under 100,000 people.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it's a very, very coral aquaculture based community then. You guys are one of the big businesses there. Maybe just tell me a little bit about the 3 different facilities and why there are 3 different facilities regionally, and what the differences are.
Yep. I think, again, it comes back to that original point of that every region has unique corals. But it also comes from a practical point of view that when I started the business, I was in Darwin. And the opportunity to lease a license was in Darwin. And there was no one doing it up there. The last person that did it up there, unfortunately, was tragically taken by a crocodile.
Oh.
And so, yeah.
Holy.
So there wasn't a huge amount of people going into that industry up there. It was, not much competition. So it was easier for me to enter the industry in Darwin. So that's where the business started. And then I quickly realized, I think after about 5 or 6 years, that all my customers were saying, well, do you get acro? Do you get scollies? Do you get acans? And I was like, no. We get all this unique stuff from Darwin, which was great. And we were selling it. But me being me, I'm like, well, I want to expand. I want to get all of that. So I expanded into cans and slept in the shed month on, month off, and went collecting in a little boat off cans and built up that facility. And then after a while, I sort of wanted to move the family out of Darwin because it's a pretty harsh place to live.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't swim in the ocean, even though we were diving, but it's a hard place to live. It's very hot. And it's probably like Florida in the States, but I think worse, like very hot and humid.
Yeah, I actually had the map up on one of my other tabs here, so I'm gonna just but so Darwin is pretty north, I'm gonna imagine.
Yeah, it's close to East Timor and Indonesia.
Okay. Yeah, and back to the whole history of the Australian reefs, you can kind of see the connection of it's fairly close to Indonesia. I mean. Yeah. I know there's, I've met travelers in Bali before that are like, oh yeah, I took a 2-hour flight over here from, Darwin.
It's a 2-hour flight from Darwin to Bali. It's great.
Yeah, that must be nice.
Yeah. And then obviously the final piece of that puzzle was getting acans and scollies, and that meant coming down here and moving the family, and we just grew the business from there. So, and then we've also branched to Western Australia. So we work the northwest Kimberley region of Australia. It's the most remote part of Australia. There's no one else collecting corals in that region where we work. In fact, it's so remote that we have to charter a plane to meet the boat to get the boxes off the boat. The boat's got to drive into a beach, unload the boxes into a full drive over the sand dunes to meet a plane on a dusty airstrip. Wow. and fly it back to Darwin.
Well, and keeping it all cool enough at the same time and all of the other risk factors.
Yeah.
I mean, when you find like really unique kind of crazy stuff, I imagine you're tracking a lot of this stuff via GPS. You've kind of got markers on those good locations. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, how often are you kind of blown away by something you pull out? Because I mean, I'm sure when it comes to like certain corals, you know, you'll see a lot of the same kind of like decent, nice morph, like the scolies, it'll be like the bleeding apples or whatever. And then every once in a while you see something that's just like, holy crap, you know, like how often does that happen for you guys?
So every unload.
Every time.
Yeah.
Every time. And our divers do the best. They obviously they're looking under the ocean and looking for a lot of different corals, and they go, oh, this one looks a little different.
Yeah.
And doesn't matter the color, we're just gonna pick it up and bring it back, have a look anyway. And usually that's the piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just the shape of the coral too, sometimes, or the color morph, or we've been lucky enough to find new, what do you call them, color strains, variants of corals, because we work in these remote areas that no one else is. The parang coral we get out of Darwin are unique. You know, the zoanthids and blasto we get out of Western Australia are really unique. A little bit different in Queensland because the Queensland fishery has been operating for a good 20 plus years. So I still think every trip we're getting surprised by what comes off the boats. It's such a cool job. And yeah,
that's really exciting. That's the kind of thing that makes me want to come down, visit you guys, and go out there sometime.
Please,
so maybe I don't know.
Good. Always welcome visitors.
Yeah. I guess, you know, a lot of people are going to wonder like who gets dibs on some of those crazy corals. I mean, I know you guys like have to be limiting for, you know, like say the ultra versions of certain things. You know, people can't just order ultra because, you know, there's only so much. So, you know, it's like it must be hard to balance that. And, you know, like who gets dibs on it? I don't know. You don't have to tell me.
Well, no, I mean,
you're not going to tell the individual company, but it will.
For us, for us here, because we frag, I obviously then would go, well, let's cut it up, and then grow as many as possible so we can all share. If it was a piece that was collected in Cairns or Darwin, then they would go to their friends and the close customers and go, we got this here, are you keen? And then build an order around it. Whilst they're selling awesome pieces, we're also trying to grow them out. And even some of them, if it's like a really cool scully or gonny, things like that, we enter them into our aquaculture program to see if we can get them breeding. Maybe you get a baby glitter gonny one day.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like the best option when you get the best stuff. I mean, we're all anybody that does aquaculture in this industry is kind of guilty of that, or, you know, wants to do that. If you get the best stuff, you want to grow it out and see it eventually, hopefully go to as many homes as possible and to be, you know, successful outside. So, you know, I imagine some of these really crazy, you know, master grade kind of pieces are going to be the ones you want to farm. Also, they're probably the most lucrative, right?
Yeah, and that's the tricky part. It's like triage at an accident site. You know, who gets the attention first and what's the most urgent? And it is really tricky for the team to decide that. And what we try and look at is the lifetime value of our customers. You know, some of our customers I've had for 15, 16 years from the beginning. Now, obviously, we look after them. You know, we've got personal relationships with these people. And not all the good stuff goes to the farm because, so for instance, on our domestic market and for a lot of our export, we even do it for Canadian customers, don't we? We have a WYSIWYG. So what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And that's like open to everyone. And like a lot of our best stuff goes up there, you know, and then the good pieces that we would have for an export, we tend to give them to our, you know, most valuable customers who have been with us for a long time. But we don't gouge for individual pieces. We know that one piece may trigger or, you know, make for them a $20,000 shipment worthwhile for them. That's how they do well. So we're in business, they're in business. We understand that it's got to work. We might have a scully that is 10 times worth what the other ones are, but we'll still charge it at a reasonable
Just charge
rate.
it as a master or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And then
that's cool.
And then they can, hopefully make good money on that, and then it covers the rest of the average stuff, or the day grades and ultras they get.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
it is really tricky, Adam. It's like, yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah. I guess something something I recall is that like the 3 different facilities, even though they're in different locations, you can, when people order through you guys, they can get corals from all the facilities shipped all together. So how much time does that add on to the shipping? Like, if it's coming out of, where is the main shipping location?
So we've actually just sort of modified that a little bit. With now Darwin is more of a satellite facility, and we've simplified it. So all our wild caught product is going to Cairns, and then all our farmed coral product is out of Bundaberg. So our customers now, if they want wild corals, they order it all from Cairns. If they want to tack on boxes from Juno, we just combine them in Brisbane, and off they go.
Okay.
So it's not adding to the transit time. It's working out really well. So essentially, our customers can get the full range of Australian wild corals, bar none, like the whole country, and then the farm stuff in one shipment. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, and the last time I did an order through my friend that does the importing, we did get stuff from a couple different facilities, and the amount of frags in the frag box from the Bundaberg, I was like, I would not want to be packing this. It was like 150 frags in a box or something. So you guys must have a pretty good organization system for packing, and a fair number of employees that seem to know. I mean, the packing was awesome, so everything came in great. So you guys got some things figured out for sure. Let's see. Another thing I want to ask about with sort of differences between Australia and the rest of the world is you guys can't bring in corals and fish from other parts of the world, right?
We can't import fish.
Yeah.
Fish, so there's imported fish in Australia, but there's no imported coral for the hobbyists.
Okay. Yeah. And that kind of makes sense. I mean, we've seen the problems in Florida with the lionfish, and you have tropical reef waters that if someone was like, hey, I'll try putting this thing in the ocean and let it grow in there for a while, it could be a real problem. So yeah, totally. Let's talk about a little bit about, first let's talk about fragging corals, and then we'll kind of get into what you guys are doing with breeding corals. But I guess I was kind of curious about fragging sort of more difficult species of LPS that are a little harder to heal. Maybe you can give me a little rundown of what you guys do. I think a lot of people will be curious about that.
That's cool. I'm guessing when you say harder to heal LPS, you mean like wall ancora and the obvious scaly?
Anything like a non-colonial type of coral. A one polyp type.
Dash. That's an interesting one. So we basically at first we just you just hold your breath and go for it.
I mean, at first.
I think at first you just hold your breath and go for it. And we found, obviously, like the way we cut up the scallies is that they will heal. Corals always had the best abilities to recover when you provide it with a stable environment, no matter what you do to it. The ability to bounce back is amazing. Doesn't mean we torture them, but like we cut through them as quick as we can to reduce the risk of infections, too much stress, too much handling. We definitely make sure we're handling it the right way. We don't push on the tissue. But it's pretty much once you've cut through the mouth, as long as it has a bit of it left, it'll be fine. Just like would frag like a colonial, sometimes you cut right through the mouth and they grow back anyway. So it's just about that. And it's more so about the aftercare that you provide it. The more time you give it, the better it grows back. And I think that stage is also as important. Yeah.
So is there any anything I'm kind of assuming you guys stay away from antibiotics, and that's been kind of a thing in the North American community that's been, I think, just tossed around a little bit too freely. But is there anything you do during the healing process, like any kind of iodine dips or anything like that help with any kind of infection, bacterial infections or anything?
We don't really dip them. So most of the corals are usually only treated if, by treated I mean like dip of any sort, like hydrogen peroxide or oil-based dips. We only dip them when we find pests or nuisance algae, things that we don't want on there. Yeah, so after we've cut them, they pretty much just go straight back into our raceways, and we do not disturb them as much as we can. And that's about it. And the other thing is just make sure they're spaced out all right. And if in case some pieces don't make it, we make sure we remove them as quick as we can, and that's about it.
Yeah,
we don't dip them. We don't know the effects of like, say, if we use an oil dip, what would it actually do to that fleshy wound that we just, put it through a pretty big saw? So we don't really find a need to do that.
Yeah,
the corals evolved to do that in the wild. They get cracked, they get broken all the time, and that's actually how they reproduce it all of the time. So it goes back to that stability. But what Juno didn't mention as well is that we've also improved our fragging station over the years, and not only improve the efficiency of it, but the water flow and the care of the frags for those first couple of hours after they've been cut, because we're cutting hundreds a day, and we found that they will mucus up and slime up, and there'll be a whole lot of debris on those cuts that has to be cleared out. And so they've got good water flow. It's just the same as your aquarium. They need good water flow, good flow through, good conditions right after that cut. If they don't, then we have had problems in the past. But if you do that, they go into a stable environment, they look after themselves.
Yeah, I guess it's not that different than nature. And again, like, fish are constantly picking at corals, and, storms and whatever, things getting bashed around. It happens. But yeah, I mean, I've heard of people putting, iodine or potassium chloride in their coral saws, and as sort of a little bit of an antiseptic way to cut. So I don't know. I feel like just a little bit of iodine in your cutting solution wouldn't be a bad idea, but I don't know if you guys are having. It sounds like you're having good success. Like, I mean, if you're cutting hundreds of scullies up a day, Yeah,
but you can always do better, can't you? Like, we're always looking for those marginal gains, those little improvements. We don't know it all, like, we're still learning, just like anyone else in this hobby, this industry. Anyone who claims to have all the answers, they're lying to you.
Yeah, and I guess another thing probably at that healing stage is maybe nutrition is more of a important component for some corals. Like, I mean, if you cut a scully into 4 and its mouth is only, a quarter the size, like, I mean, it's probably getting more of its, needs met from the zooxanthellae. But I think maybe, like, I don't know, like, what is the feeding kind of protocol like for the facilities?
I have to say, from a pizza scully's point of view, they actually do feed. We have seen them at night, their tentacles come out just like it usually would. You're just not seeing the whole round scully. But yeah, the frags actually do pretty well, and they do eat as if nothing happened. And with feeding, we basically use our own like a little formula, basically different types of fish meat, bivalve meat, that kind of like a chummy moment. And then we just add our own additional aminos, vitamins. We kind of do our own version of it. We don't use products that are available on the market because it's economically not sustainable for us. So we kind of just do our own version, and we do like a little broadcast feed kind of moment for all of our corals, because feeding them, like target feeding, is not practical for us. We put about close to 500 to 2,000 pieces in a raceway, so we don't really have the time for that. But they corals do get fed quite often here. And you can see they do benefit from it in terms of recovery, gaining color, and all of that too.
Yeah, so it's just a blend of different sizes of different,
It's
our secret KFC 12. What is it? Herbs and what is it? 12 herbs and spices. We've got our secret recipe.
Yeah,
a lot of the stuff we get from bodybuilding websites, and it's we kind of take this shotgun approach, because no one really knows what the perfect coral nutrition is. Like, it's not. There is not one. There's plenty of commercial products out there, but for us, they're not viable, and there's no real solid peer-reviewed evidence on exactly what coral nutrition should be. So we take a bit of a scatter approach. We feed a lot of different stuff. We're experimenting with algae and live feeds as well. And we've got over 100 species of coral in the farm. So, and every species of coral, as you know, is kind of a little bit different. So to get it, we're still learning. We're still learning about feeding. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to find something for everybody. But yeah, anytime I hear about these mixtures of different seafoods, I think of the Simpsons episode with the slurry. Do you remember that one? It's basically slurry.
It's a meat shake. Yeah, it's a meat shake, and it smells like burley. If anyone goes fishing and uses the chum, it's like chum, but with all the added aminos and trace and good stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So so you guys are doing some aminos too. That's kind of in addition. Yeah. Actually, a question I had and kind of an earlier note here was, are there, would you say, like, I don't know the Australian product market for, reef products. Is there anything you think that you guys have that's kind of unique that we don't really have in North America or Europe?
No, I mean, you guys get everything that we can get here. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, there's Coral Essentials seems to do good stuff, but I don't know if they do anything particularly different from what some of the other companies we have access to do. But I've heard good stuff about the CVE from a few hobbyists.
Those are good.
They do some good stuff.
Yeah, you guys can get that there, right?
I think so, probably. I don't know. Maybe I'll reach out to those guys. But I guess for you guys too, it's like on your commercial level, some of these hobby style products, unless you can not viable. Yeah.
And also with us too, like goes back to that, we've got that backup salt water at our disposal, so we can always do a water change if we're unsure. But if we have the lighting, the water flow, stability, and the feeding right, that's it. That, it takes care of itself. Yeah, we don't. We try and keep it simple.
Yeah, and actually that brings me to a question about lighting. I mean, you got to be pretty cost effective of how you do that. So I'm assuming it's going to be mostly LED, like over everything. But what kind of lights are you guys using?
So for the two sheds that we have, two sheds, each. Two systems in each, and then we have one that's outside in a greenhouse that fully utilizes sunlight. So I guess you could say we run both LED and natural light. The LEDs are the Orphix, the really big lights. Yeah, so they provide a good coverage for a 6-meter raceway. And it's more cost effective for us as well, and the power is just right for us too. So it's the Amazonas, I think it's 960. So those are the lights that we run indoors, and then for outdoors it's just the greenhouse. We've got it partially shaded so they're not exposed to 1,000 power. And it's we just put in enough shade to find it like right where we want it. And we grow things like aquapora outside. So antids do well outside too, and then some philia actually recover quite well outside too.
And we do clams, our giant clams outside.
Yeah, I'll show a little video of the clam pool because I saw that. That's at the Bundaberg facility, right? Yeah, because they just love the light. And we also use Delua Vitaminis, strip lights. They're great. The lights that we've been through so many LEDs, and because of the environment that we keep them in, anything with a fan doesn't work. Anything with Wi-Fi connectivity doesn't work. When you
it's like
hundreds of these lights.
Extreme humidity in there. It's like a little tropical.
So better to something with a heat sink that's passively cooled. Okay.
Yeah, we just needed something that works for us on our scale. And sometimes servicing LEDs with a fan repeatedly is just not very viable for us.
No, that didn't work. And a really interesting point about the greenhouse is that we get the sun rising and falling, and setting over the greenhouse. And what we found is, particularly with the euphyllias, the cuts, when we do them under LEDs, will heal, but the growth is on top of the coral. It's a single point of light. When we put them outside in the greenhouse, that sun moving over the coral, it's getting sun on the sides a lot more. The corals grow down on that cut way quicker. And they're also throwing out little pups on the base of the coral because of that light getting into the whole region. The downfall with that is you can't really see their colors in the greenhouse until you get
Yeah, that's the trade-off. Hey, it's funny when I think about natural light, and we think our tanks are so bright. And I've got a window that's kind of near probably the edge of one of my frag systems, and I've been cracking the window just to let a little fresh air in this time of year. And when the light shines at a certain time of day into the tank, you can't even see the tank lighting. Like it's you forget how bright the sun is. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, cool, my lights are doing nothing compared to the sun.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I've thought about that too. I mean, our lights are so static in one spot, and I know people have experimented with track lighting that moves, but you can't beat the sun in that respect for sure. Yeah, that's cool.
It's cheap.
Yeah, for sure. And again, back to the clams, I guess. So because you guys are selling your own aquaculture clams, are they you guys got a pretty good system dialed for culturing them?
So the clams I started doing in Darwin, I'm going to say 8 years ago. And when I left Darwin, that kind of stopped happening because, it's, I guess, my little pet project. And so I've just started doing it again down here in Bundaberg. I've just spawned the Maxima clam. So we've got Northern Territory Blue Lightning Maximas. I've got some Maximas from the Kimberley region, which totally different colors, really cool. We've got some Crocea to do. We've got Squamosa to do next, and we've got Hippopus as well.
Cool.
The thing with clam aquaculture is anything I do today isn't really going to be ready for a year or two, for export. So but we're chipping away at it. It's exciting. We love it.
Yeah, it's more like a distillery or something where you've got a product that needs to be aged, but it's more you're a couple of years behind. Yeah, do the Maximas from different regions, do the eggs and sperm, do they go together?
Yeah, they can.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, that's the stuff that gets me the most excited in the hobby, is just, generating stuff that is something you wouldn't even find in the wild, some of these chimera kind of corals and stuff like that.
Well, and that excites me as well. And I'm really keen to do that with the clams once I've got a good base of the wild strains and start hybridizing things. One interesting thing that we've found with chimeras in the coral, and we're probably getting ahead of ourselves with spawning, but self-fertilization. We tend to get a larger amount of chimeras when we accidentally self-fertilize corals, and one of the researchers in Australia have sort of spoken to me about that they've found that as well. So that's interesting. Way less survivorship in the young, but we've got some chimera scollies that are pretty cool, like they're fused together.
Yeah. And I had Jamie Craggs on. We did a big long episode on his research, and he kind of explained the whole settlement phase and how the chimeras are formed, and it's cool. I mean, like you say, there's more of a risk that they're gonna fight, but there's always that chance that you're gonna get this interesting morph between them. Yeah, that's cool. Well, maybe let's dive into the breeding stuff you guys are doing. I guess we don't have to get too much into the super technical side, because my episode with Jamie, we go through every stage. It's like a 2.5 hour conversation. And then I also had Salmon Marine from Reef in Germany on recently. So I've covered a lot of coral spawning stuff, so which has been cool. But I'd like to kind of know what you guys have kind of had success with and what you're kind of focused on right now.
We've done many species.
We've done over 14 species.
Yeah, wow. We've done a lot of them. Basically, what we're trying to do is spawn as many species as we can. We want to understand as many species as we can, get all of the information, understand what they're doing, how they do it, how do we make it happen again next year is our current goal. We don't want to limit our spawning experience to just one thing, like just scollies, but we definitely want to do more. So currently we've done some Micromusa, the Lords, we've done Acro, we've done Chalice, a little bit of Clove polyps, and we've also done the Gonies, the Euphilia species, the Hammer, the Glab, the Torch, the Visa, and then you have your Scullies, Trackies, and Cats as well. Yeah, so we've done all those so far. Our goal is to make sure that they keep doing it, and we understand more of that as we go down every spawning season.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
guess one thing that's nice for you guys is you're pretty able to predict the spawns based on, all the corals are from Australia. Like they're, you kind of know when the cycles are, but do they get like reset or messed up when these corals are in the facility sometimes? Like, does it not always stay predictable?
No, that's what we're trying to work on. So the triggers will, like if we get a coral in even 6 months before, it will still spawn in sync with the wild corals.
Mm-hmm.
But what we find is that the gamete production isn't as good as a fresh wild one. So there's obviously some nutritional needs for that broodstock coral that we're not meeting yet, and we're working on that. The other big key for us is out of season spawning, ideally in business hours, because we're kind of camped out at work for nights and nights on end,
Yeah. It's any day now, but yeah.
And each species, like the inshore Great Barrier Reef species, will spawn at a different time to the offshore. The Northern Territory species, completely different time to the rest of Australia, and the West Australian ones, we haven't figured that out yet. So there's a lot to learn. Hey, like I often say that this coral aquaculture is like a marathon, and we're in that first 5 meters of that marathon. There's so much to learn.
Yeah.
But the ultimate goal with the spawning is to be able to close that life cycle in captivity and have that second, third generation being produced. And realistically, that's going to take, with these slow growing LPS corals, you're talking, I think we're going to be 5 years, 5 to 10 year project to be doing that. Things like acro, the Australian Institute of Marine Science have done that. They're doing that. And so, we're doing a little bit of that, but our real focus to start, we could break it to 2 areas of focus. It's the ornamental industry, which is largely LPS and those unique Australian LPS, like your acans, your scollies, gold torch and stuff like that. But then there's also the reef restoration side of what we're doing, and that's really based on reef building corals like acros, pacilloporas, montiporas, corals that bleach really quickly but hold the reef together, and the ones that are really at risk on the GBR.
I guess one of the things I took away from my other conversations with Jamie and the other coral spawning guests I had is it sounds like you can force the spawning cycle a little bit by creating a temperature and light cycle. So ideally you could get multiple spawns a year if you trick the seasonal cycles into doing that. So are you playing around with that stuff a bit?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, 100%. We've many years ago discovered that by accident in Darwin by leaving some corals in a bucket, and up there the temperatures are so high that temperature just skyrocketed and they spawn.
Oh, that's crazy. Right. Yeah.
And that's how we spawn our sea urchins, our clams, Trocus snails, is that temperature trigger. So we're definitely looking at that. John's in the process of building and commissioning his broodstock conditioning and spawning system, which will be, I guess, similar to what Jamie's done, but probably a lot bigger and a bit more commercial scale. But it is, to try and get multiple spawning events throughout the year with multiple species and with auto egg collectors. So we can collect all that stuff automatically.
Yeah. Wow. And also, I guess, one of the tricky parts seems to be the settlement phase. So like, what have you kind of observed and learned in that area?
We're working on using like different types of what do you call it? Sediment?
Substrate.
Substrate. We're working on using different types of substrate and see what they are actually liking more of. It takes a lot of time, but we're working on that right now, and hopefully we will have a better answer soon. So right now we're just trying like a little bit of everything, anything that we can think of. It's like a buffet when it comes to availability of different things with the tank for them to choose to settle.
We're narrowing it down, and what we do know now is that CCA, so coralline algae, isn't the cue for a lot of the corals we work with. And I kind of already knew that from diving these environments and harvesting these corals, because there isn't any CCA where we're getting our scollies and acans. It's often coastal, dirty rocks, So we're figuring out the triggers for those species has been a little bit different for the settlement cues. But we're experimenting with concrete, ceramic. But what it comes down to is the topography of those sediment tiles and the surface area. The corals really like little nooks and crannies to settle in, protects them from herbivores. And we're experimenting with micro eddies. So when you have flow in the settlement tank, so traditionally settlement tanks are static. That's really what the accepted research has done for acro, and it's a static tank with some aeration. We've experimented with using the paddle wheel tanks and some other different types of low impact pumps, creating flow refuges. So where there's a lot of flow and then there's a refuge, and a lot of the corals are settling in that flow refuge, which
it gives them that moment to kind of, yeah.
And in some instances, that flow almost kind of triggers them to settle as well.
Okay, interesting. Well, one of my big takeaways from the chat with the Reef guys was that they've discovered that there was a bacteria strains that are on CCA that actually trigger the settlement. So they were actually experimenting with using those bacterial strains to encourage the settlement. So that plus the right porosity of a surface for them to settle on is probably just a combination of, getting really good success, I would imagine. But it also depends on the coral, right?
Yep. That's not really going to make much of a difference for an inshore Euphilia parancora or an acan, because they're not in that environment. We've experimented with parent colonies being in the same system, so that pheromone or that scent of the parent colony can trigger them to settle as well. So there's a lot to it, and the Australian Institute of Marine Science are working on the same thing. There's a lot of us working on it, and they're isolating, I don't know if it's the bacteria, but it's the certain things that are in that CCA or different materials to add to the tank. And also just we've found that a new tile versus an aged tile with a biofilm on it, you'll have much better success if you've got conditioned tiles for them to settle on. Rather than a brand new. But having said that, you do all of that, and then the little buggers will still settle on the side of the tank.
They don't even want the tiles.
Piece of egg crate,
tiles.
You get it all perfect, and then they settle on the egg crate. You're like, what the hell?
I heard another theory about settlement that's kind of made me laugh a little bit. It kind of makes sense in some ways, is that the sounds and the vibrations of a reef, like the crack of the pistol shrimp, the different little underwater sounds will let a coral know. I mean, it has some sense of this. Would let it know that it's in the right spot, and now it's time to kind of settle down. So I wonder if you're having in facility spawnings happening, just put on a soundtrack of reef sounds. Set the mood.
It sounds way out there, but it's true, because you drive on a reef, you can hear it. And these things are floating around in the ocean. It probably isn't just one silver bullet. There'd be a lot of different things that cue them to this is a good spot to settle.
Totally.
Yeah.
So as far as Euphilia and anything in that sort of category, it sounds like I've heard from quite a few people that have ended up finding settled corals starting actually in their sump, and this might be in a situation where they have it's like lower flow down there, maybe less light, but they might have like a small light down there. And I've heard this from a couple hobbyists where they found little baby torches or hammers starting up. So I wonder what the success down there versus up in the main tank, what the real difference is.
It's probably from corals, particularly with their glabrescence, the torch, that planulate. So they're a brooder. So rather than putting sperm and egg into the water column and have to fertilize, spend a couple of weeks going through the cycle, they come out pretty much ready to settle. And what will often happen is that they can pass through the overflow and down into a sump area where there's no predators. So there's no snails, grazing on them. There's no fish. And then that's where they'll grow. A lot of that incidental spawning is planulation.
Okay. I didn't realize that they were brooders, so that makes sense. But brooders can still mix, right? Like they still can blend, because I know people that have had torches spawn, they've had morphs pop up that they didn't have in the first place, right?
And you mean color morphs?
Color morphs.
And that's one of the most fascinating things with spawning, is you cannot predict your colors. So far we've got some awesome acro at the moment that are red. and we didn't have bred parents.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. When it's the same when I do the giant clams, I'll try and pick the best quality broodstock and color of the broodstock, and I'll just get everything but sometimes.
Yeah.
And the Scollies is a great example. Yeah. We're trying to do masters, and and you'll get some grays, some browns, and this last one we've got a lot of golds, which was
Yeah,
because there's a lot of research in that to figure it out.
Yeah, it's interesting because you think you put a couple master Scollies together, if you could actually isolate, those eggs and sperm and be sure that those were the parents, you think you get more masters, but like you say, you might just get green or brown or just something kind of meh. Yeah, it's interesting that genetic information is kind of there to do something different, but it's not always being expressed. You just don't know. Yeah.
That may vary between species too. It's So for us in the ornamental industry, that's really important, and there's just no research that's been done on it.
That's crazy, but that's part of the fun. Again, it's just not knowing what you're gonna get. Any other observations as far as the sort of spawning? Like, are you guys have corals on the market now that have been like fully aquacultured in the facility?
We've sold a handful, but really we're wanting to keep the rest of them to continue our R&D. So and I guess from a business point of view, there's no use releasing a product until it's consistent and you can back it up. And we can't do that with the spawn corals yet. We've got tens of thousands of them, but I want hundreds of thousands of them. And then, look at this. We can open it up to the world, So we're just chipping. Each year, when we first started, we got a success rate of a few hundred. And every year we do it, we're increasing that exponentially.
Yeah, just making little changes, and probably sometimes a little change doesn't make things better, but overall, it's like the economy. Hopefully it just a little dips, but it keeps going up.
Well, you come and talk to us or come visit in a couple of years and we'll have a laugh about, we only had a few, hundreds of thousands now. We've run out of space. It could change really quickly with some advancements and some knowledge, improvements.
Yeah, definitely, like you're talking about with that flow system, that could be a huge ticket to ensuring better success.
Well, and we ran out of space in the last spawning season in our traditional larval rearing cone. So we use a traditional method that aquaculture uses for fish and everything. And we just ran out of space, and we had a big acro spawn, and we just thought, well, what are we going to do? And being a small business, it's not a research facility. We don't need permission and all these papers to do something. We're just like, let's just chuck them in the paddle wheel and see how they go. They did great.
Lots of settlements.
Yeah. And we didn't have to lift a finger. Whereas the traditional methods we use is multiple steps through to fertilization, rinsing, larval rearing, to settlement, to early grow out. We did it all in the one system.
Yeah, that's really promising. I guess I was wondering, so as far as bringing those corals to the market, when that happens, would the CITES and the Fish and Wildlife stuff maybe be different around corals that are, fully captive bred? Like, because you're not taking a wild animal, right?
Yeah, so the 100%. And the issue is that the speed at which we are developing this technique in this industry is faster than government moves. So we have this problem now where we're going to the Australian government going, look what we're doing, we need a permit, because right now, even our Frag corals, which are multi-generational corals, we still have to export as wild, which is madness, they're not wild corals anymore, but the legislation is not keeping pace with industry and the advancements in the hobby and the industry. So we're working closely with the Australian government to remedy that, and I'm hoping late this year or next year we will have a solution which will be a different code when we export, and some really strict rules around what is aquaculture, because we want to make it legitimate and sustainable and no loopholes. We don't just want to have a chop shop. It's got to be the real deal. So I guess that sort of stuff takes time. So we are definitely working on that. And you're right, it needs to be a different classification.
Yeah, you need somebody in the, legislative side that's a reef hobbyist, that maybe gets it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Few and far between, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how popular is the hobby in Australia, would you say?
It's pretty big.
Is it? Yeah. I mean, I would think it would be because, but also some people would be like, why would I need a tank? I got, this. I mean, not everybody's near the Great Barrier Reef, obviously, but, people have access to it.
Yeah.
I think it's still in its infancy compared to the States, and like what you guys have in North America and Canada, and that is amazing. Like the frag meets that you have, and that we don't really get that in Australia. We have little ones, but I would say it's still pretty small. But
it's definitely there. I think it's like once you get like a little freshwater tank, and next thing you go, oh, what's the next big thing I can try? Or some people who live on a coast are like, we really like the reef. It's one of the great natural wonders, and we want it in our home as well. So they go and set up a tank, and it can be as simple as a little cube with a pair of clownfish in there to something the craziest you've ever seen. A whole wall of the house is a tank. There's definitely a good community though. So when there are events that we put together, people would fly interstate just to come to these events, and it's wonderful. So we hope we get more hobbyists.
I think there's still a perception too that's too difficult amongst a lot of hobbyists, and there's some really good retailers in Australia that are debunking that, and having really excellent display tanks and building that hobby from the grassroots. We also do tours through our facility, our coral farm here, and we're sort of talking to people about the importance of keeping aquariums and how easy it can be once you get the right equipment, and how beautiful they can be. I reckon there's heaps more space for growth in the Australian market with as our population grows. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the hobby has gotten a lot easier, especially in the last 5 to 8 years or so. I mean, I've been doing this since around 2001. And, I've sort of mentored a couple people's systems over the last couple of years, and they've just, a few of these tanks just are amazing. Like they're just doing great because, I mean, if you have the right advice, not to say I can tell everybody the best thing to do, but I feel like I can give a pretty good foundation of, how to get a system going. You can have a freaking awesome tank in a year and a half or so, or even a year if you're doing things right. So,
Oh man, I used to keep reef aquariums with under gravel filters. And then the big thing that came out was the mini reef filter with the bioballs and the spinning arm. And
I remember that stuff.
Back then, gonioperas were considered you can't keep gonioperas alive. The tech and the hobby has just come so far in the past 20 years. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I guess I can kind of go to a bit of a final question here and talk about it as much as we want. But what do you? I mean, I kind of know already that you're kind of doing this spawning thing. You're hoping to do these fully aquaculture corals. But where do you kind of see the future of the hobby in the next 5 to 10 years? And what would Monsoon's sort of goals be, and how that would fit in?
I think for us, we'll definitely we'll be around. We'll still be looking into the same thing, and hopefully by that time we'll have coral spawning pretty down pat, and hopefully have a stable product by then to be able to share with everyone in tank bred corals. I think that would be quite important. As to how our reefing scene's going to be like, I don't know. I hope everyone's still going to be here and loving the
I think so. I mean, I guess that poses a question, and maybe you can debunk any, people that don't understand. I mean, people listening to this podcast know what's up, but, people that don't understand, that you collect some wild corals, you export them, you're picking very selectively, probably, here, there. Like the impact, what is the actual impact of collecting wild corals, on the reef?
So I've been doing it now for 15 plus years, and I've dived the same sites. In some instances, we've been diving the exact same sites for that period of time. It can be done and is done really sustainably in Australia. We are really heavily regulated in terms of, all our boats are monitored via VMS, electronic monitoring systems. We have electronic logbooks, very well managed in that case, but it's not perfect. Queensland fishery particularly just went through a transition from having a basket quota, which meant if you had 5 ton, you could get 5 ton pretty much of whatever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about what happens with that. Your ACANs, your scollies, they're getting targeted and they're getting locally depleted in some areas, and we've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago, the government changed that to individual caps on each species, which I think has been a great move.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just go and get all your quota on one species, which is not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hand harvest industry, where if you think about our company, I've mapped out the areas where we can. It's not going to make sense to your audience, but 29,000 Sydney harbours is pretty much where we work. Sydney Harbour is one of the biggest harbours in Australia, massive. Our hooker lines are 150 metres long. So we're never going to get to explore the whole of our areas in our lifetimes. And then
that's crazy to think, hey?
It's huge.
Yeah.
Then you add on top of that the green zones, marine parks, a lot
protected.
of the coastline's locked up that we can't harvest from.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really sustainable industry. I would challenge someone to follow our boat and see what we've taken after we leave. We're hand chipping off small pieces of coral, and we like I said, the same sites for 15 years, and we let it regrow.
Yeah.
Having said that, I don't think that the international scrutiny and pressure on coral reefs is going away, and it really shouldn't. I think climate change is a really big threat to our reefs.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're learning through the aquarium hobby is it's essential for going back into that reef restoration and understanding of coral morphology and growth and reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
Science is doing a great job, but hobby is doing a really good job too. And all the technology, all the improvements for systems been driven by the hobby. I can see the hobby in the next 5 to 10 years transitioning more and more to aquaculture product.
Mm-hmm.
I believe firmly that the wild caught product is sustainable, but I think international pressure will see those numbers decrease. I think it's inevitable. And the work that we're doing now, my hope, I'm confident it will be able to one day replace that, but we're a long way off it.
Yeah.
And so as a hobby, we need to embrace wild caught and make sure that it's sustainable and that we can stand up and defend it on the international scene. And at the same time, we need to be working towards aquacultured coral. So we're reducing our reliance on the wild. But essentially, we're always going to need some genetic material coming in from the wild to keep our farms going and genetically diverse and replace broodstock mortality. It's inevitable, it's just it's going to be part of it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, the thing to be said too is this hobby in general, people that see a reef aquarium, like a really good reef aquarium with coral and nice fish for the first time when they're young or whatever, then they get that inspiration. I think it builds, appreciation and for young people or whoever, just to really acknowledge the beauty of the things that we can, that live out in nature. And, I mean, I feel like this is like the glory days right now. We're still able to bring stuff in. We're still able to have wild corals, but this is like our big collection time, and there's going to be a day where we probably can't collect wild anymore, but let's get awesome at doing what we're doing right now so that if that door ever closes, we got a really nice collection,
Yeah, exactly. And that we're building up that biobank now. Mm-hmm. But that point that you touched on about not everyone gets to see the reef, and this inspires, that new generation. Mm-hmm. That's actually our business, is it vision or motto? But our business vision and motto is actually that we believe in bringing the wonder and beauty of the coral reef to the world so it can be enjoyed, understood, and valued. Mm-hmm. Because if people don't understand and see something in front of them, they don't value it and they don't protect it. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, 99% of the world's population isn't going to go diving on the reef. They're not going to see it.
Yeah.
So how are they going to value it if they don't know it's there and they're not, fascinated by it? Like both Juno and I got into this at an early age through aquariums, and that grows that fascination to go into science and to go into reef restoration or it could just be into the aquarium industry.
Yeah. You never know when you're making a future, marine biologist
we see it here in the facility. It's awesome. You get these kids coming through and they're just like, what?
Yeah.
And then you go to them, oh yeah, you can get a job in this industry. This is growing. And they're just like, blows their mind. It's unreal to see. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. My favorite comment is, are those things all alive?
Yeah. Some of them would go and ask, oh, what do I actually have to study to get your job? And they'll go, oh, well then. And then you tell them everything. But like we run these tours right now, and a lot of kids get to see, or like, hey, there's actually a reef like out that way in the ocean. You should go have a look, and then make sure you remember how nice they are when they're under blue lights. You're seeing actually those things out there too. Because sometimes they're like, oh, but when we go snorkeling, everything looks brown. It doesn't look like this. They go, it's actually a brown coral. It's actually very happy and healthy, and when you see them when you go snorkel, that's like a really good sign. So it's really good. And then sometimes we actually host some students come back later on from high school. They go, oh, we actually want some work experience here, because they have they run aquarium. What were the classes? Some of the schools here now run aquaculture classes, which is crazy.
Vocational training.
They offer that, and so part of their thing for work experience is like they want to do this here, so they come to us, and it's amazing. You get to spend a week or two with them and show them everything and like how coral farming is done, and they're so happy about it. It's a really good experience for us as well.
Oh, well, but those are the kids, you're getting them to pack those big frag boxes with 200 frags, right? Just get them to do it.
One of them is, Paddy started off as a volunteer, and then he did traineeship at school, and now he's working with us, and he's packing orders and doing our spawning with John.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
cool.
That's cool. Well, and for Juno, I mean, that's really cool that you kind of like aquaculture in itself as a career is kind of like, it could be just more of like I don't know. I feel like maybe just a lot of manual work involved, but you found a really cool direction to go in it. So you probably have a lot of fun there and a lot of work, but
still a lot of manual work.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's happy days.
Yeah. I think that my big thing would just be just seeing crazy stuff that you don't see all the time. You're probably just mind blown on a daily or weekly basis, I would imagine. Yeah.
And seeing it all in the one facility from all over Australia is crazy, like one tank, you're looking at coral from the remote Kimberley region, and then the next system you're looking at corals from Cairns or Mackay, and it's great. And that's one thing when visitors come through, they're just like, man, some people might be seasoned scuba divers, diving their whole life, and they're like, I've never seen any of these corals. And it's like, well, a lot of them are deep water, they're dirty water, there's crocodiles, there's sharks where we get them. And they're right up in the coast, they're not out on the beautiful outer reef where all the tourists go.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a mission to get to some of these, especially at the depths too. Wow, that's super cool. Was there anything else you guys wanted to talk about or mention? Maybe,
just our partnerships with Australian researchers.
Okay, yeah.
So we've actually got 2 university researchers here now from the Future Reefs Department from the University of Technology in Sydney. And we're running some experiments here on corals and building tolerance to climate change. And so we've donated part of our facility and our equipment to them and a whole heap of corals for them to work on. And that's the second time they visited, which is really cool. So we're building these relationships with researchers because they've got all the excellent genetic testing stuff and the labs that we don't have, but we've got the access to commercial scale coral farming and all the species. So when you bring the two together, we actually ended up getting some really good on the ground results that are going to hopefully result in papers being produced that will benefit all reef restoration operators around the world. So we're really excited about that and really proud of that.
That's an awesome thing for you guys to offer as a collaboration. I'm kind of guessing that, my theory was always that the Zooxanthellae or Symbiodinicia, there might be strains that are more resistant to warming events. And that was kind of, an area of, maybe figuring out which strains tend to be more resilient in those situations. I mean, it's kind of like a Band-Aid to the problem, but, it's like we have to find solutions in whatever way we can, right? So is that kind of part of it, or?
Yeah, that is definitely part of it. It's looking at trace element additions to the water as well, the water column and the substrate where the corals grow. It all starts out in the field that these guys that we're the Future Reefs team have developed some testing equipment in the field where we can take samples of a coral, and within a few hours they can tell us the thermal tolerance of that coral. So what we're doing, we've seen around the world reef restoration projects like in the Caribbean and Florida have been running for multiple years, almost have 100% mortality recently. And the reason being is because in the past, we haven't been really able to select our broodstock corals for their resilience to climate change. So essentially all you're doing is you're growing more of the same coral that's going to bleach anyway. So if you're playing a game of poker and you keep having the same hand of cards, you're just going to lose and lose. We'd be able to select these broodstock for their climate change resilience. We're adding multiple aces to our deck of cards and we're rigging the game, we're rigging it. So when we bring those corals back to the facility, we can produce them en masse, and then they're going to transfer those traits of climate change, of resilience to their young. That's the idea. They go back out to the reef, they grow, they spawn, pass on those traits, and we're building resilience in the reef long term rather than just adding straight biomass to the reef. Yeah, it's a real strategic approach that it's really cool.
That's interesting. Yeah, I saw a lecture by Dr. Ruth Gates maybe about 10 years ago or something. She's passed away since, but she talked about these corals in Hawaii. I think it was Possilopora or something like that. And, there'd be a whole region where like 95% of these corals bleached, and there'd be that 5% that were the exact same species. And they look totally fine, still bright pink or whatever. And, the thing was, what is different about these ones? So, there's your clue, right?
Yeah, and that happens all up and down the reef in Australia, and every reef that bleaches, there are always winners and losers. So the key is pick those winners, produce them en masse, rig that card game with all the aces, and then put it back out for them to do their thing.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and just a little update as far as I feel like it was 3 or 4 years ago there was some really bad bleaching events. Like, how has it been the last few years?
Yeah, so it was 2016 to 18, I think, really bad bleaching. And that was just right at the point where I started the facility in Cairns, and it was heartbreaking. There were whole patches of bommies and reefs that were just dead. Since then, we've had really good recovery. The researchers and the field studies they were doing were showing the best coral coverage in years. Really good coral coverage on the GBR. We just had another mass bleaching in our summer, so your winter, and that's beginning to recover now. And I think there's more data coming out now on that recovery. But yeah, it's worrying. I live on the coast here in Bundaberg, and I spearfish and snorkel that local area, and I know every individual acan and coral. And there's been some winners and losers, definitely. But it's starting to recover now. So I'm hopeful for the future. And when I say hope, I think there's a difference between optimistic and hopeful. So being optimistic is like, she'll be right, mate. That's a really good Australian saying. She'll be right, mate. Don't worry about it. It'll take care of itself. I'm past the point of optimism. I'm hopeful. And hope is, I think we've got a future in this, but we play a part in that recovery, and we can do something about it. So I'm hopeful for the future of the reef, because Australian government's changing their tact. They're looking at intervention. They're looking at changing things, and we can be a part of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's see here. I think we covered almost my questions, and I guess people just should know that if they want to order through you guys, I mean, they have to be like a registered business with all the proper imports. But maybe just mention the, what to do if they want to set up an account or get in touch with you guys.
If you guys want to set up an account with us, then definitely email us through hello@monsoonaquatics.com.au or message us on our Facebook page, and we can go from there. We'll communicate with you, find out who you are, what you do, where you're from, if you have import papers, and then work out something from there on.
Yeah, if you're serious. Yeah. But yeah, you guys actually, through my importer, we did a little bit of a smaller shipment, which was nice. So I'm assuming that, it's possible for slightly smaller companies to place an order. Obviously, you want it, if you're getting a CITES, you want it to be bigger. But in this case, we were able to get, it was maybe 8 or 10 boxes or something like that, and it was all packed super well. It was awesome. So
cool.
Super happy with
we
the
don't
product.
We don't have any minimum orders, and we also do a full range of fish as well, endemic fish to Australia and coral sea.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we've just talked about coral this whole time. We didn't even get into the fish, but maybe some other time. I mean, it'd be great to catch up with you guys another time, and maybe in a year or two, we'll just see kind of where you guys are at with the spawning stuff, and I think also, if I hear anything that maybe you guys didn't hear through the coral spawning stuff that people are all talking about, I'll relay it back to you guys, and we can kind of keep a dialogue on it.
Yeah. There's a lot of people working on this stuff, and we're all so busy that we don't often get to communicate with each other. Like Jamie Craigs, for example, we've reached out a few times, and he's flat out, we're flat out, and a lot of us are working on stuff in isolation. So in collaboration, is key to move the whole industry forward. Yeah,
cool. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for making the time. I'm glad we were able to finally make this happen.
That's my fault. Sorry.
That's all right. Hey, I know you're busy. So how many employees, by the way, between all the facilities?
Well, we got over 35 at the moment. We have 6 boats that sort of unload and work with us, and over 35 staff. And
cool. Well, it's an awesome company. You guys are doing awesome stuff. So I can't wait to see where things go in the future. And this has been a great chat. I really appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon.
Thanks so much. Okay. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.
Bye. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Reef with Daniel and Juno from Monsoon Aquatics. Make sure if you are a coral seller that you go check out their website at monsoonaquatics.com.au, and you can set up an account and hopefully bring in some of their amazing corals. Just another shout out to our sponsor Fauna Marine. Definitely check out some of their new exciting products that they brought to the market this year. If you have any suggestions for future guests, want to ask me a question, or just reach out in general, you can email me at beyondthereefpod@gmail.com. And if you're looking for high-quality aquacultured corals in Canada, please go to my website at fraggarage.ca. Hope to hear from you soon.